Eli Hartman had always imagined that the biggest decisions of his life would come with clarity, bright, sharp certainty that cut through doubt like a blade. But as the late-night flight to Cairo hummed beneath him, he felt anything but certain. The cabin lights glowed a dim gold, passengers already drifting into uneasy sleep, and Eli sat rigid in his seat, his hands clasped tightly as if praying for reassurance. Outside the small oval window, the world was a black ocean speckled with distant stars. He replayed the last message Mariam had sent him only hours before he left for the airport. "I'll be waiting, finally, after all these months, you'll be real." She always said things like that, in poetic whispers, warm confessions, and surprisingly youthful excitement. That was what had drawn him in first, the way she made him feel seen, understood, important. At 38 years younger than her, he knew people would judge him. Had already judged him, if he counted the last conversation with his mother. "Eli, people aren't always who they say they are," she'd warned, worry sharpening her voice. "A woman you met online? In another country? You don't know anything about her." He had ended the call abruptly, unable to handle the disappointment in her tone. His mother had never approved of his choices. Jobs he quit halfway through, relationships that fell apart, impulses he followed without thinking them through. But this time felt different. With Mariam, he felt purposeful, anchored. She spoke to him like he mattered, like he wasn't just drifting through life hoping something would finally claim him. Still now, at 32,000 feet, doubt crept into him like cold seeping through a thin wall. He shifted in his seat, listening to the murmur of the engines. The quiet around him made it too easy to remember the loneliness he'd been fighting for years, the string of failed romances, the move to a new city for a job that didn't last, the hollow apartments, the nights he spent scrolling through conversations just to feel less alone. Mariam entered his life at a moment when he needed someone the most. What started as a comment she left on a poetry forum became daily messages, then nightly calls that stretched into early morning hours. Her voice, soft, steady, hypnotic, had become his routine. She told him stories about growing up in Alexandria, about losing her husband, about the quiet life she lived now in Giza. She sent pictures too, sunsets over the Nile, her favorite books, her hands resting on a balcony rail as city lights glowed behind her. But never her full face. Not once. Eli always told himself he didn't care. And yet the uncertainty gnawed at him even now. What if she wasn't who she claimed to be? What if he was flying across continents for a stranger? The plane shuddered slightly, jolting him back to the present. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent into Cairo shortly," the pilot announced. Eli exhaled slowly. No turning back now. As the aircraft lowered, Cairo appeared beneath him, a sprawling maze of lights and desert shadows, ancient and electric all at once. The sight stole his breath. It was beautiful, but in a way that felt overwhelming, like standing at the doorway of a life he wasn't sure he was ready for. The air hit him like warm sand the moment he stepped off the plane. The humidity clung to his skin, mixing with the strange sweetness drifting through the airport corridors. He moved through customs, his heart pounding. Every step felt heavier, as if gravity here carried its own intentions. Outside the airport doors, the night was alive. Taxis honking, vendors calling out, strangers brushing past him with hurried purpose. Eli tightened his grip on his backpack, scanning the crowd for the woman he'd crossed an ocean to meet. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Mariam, "Don't move. I see you." Eli's pulse quickened. He looked up, searching the shadows, unsure whether the thrill in his chest was excitement or the first warning of something darker waiting for him in this unfamiliar land. And somewhere nearby, unseen, someone else watched him too. Eli froze when the message appeared on his screen, "Don't move. I see you." For a moment he stood under the flickering airport lights, his pulse throbbing in his ears. Then, through the crowd, a figure emerged, slow, deliberate, wrapped in a long black shawl that swayed with the warm Cairo wind. Mariam. She moved toward him with surprising grace for her age, her steps measured, her eyes sharp. Eli had imagined a warm embrace, maybe even tears, but instead she stopped a few feet away, studying him as if confirming he was real. Her face was lined but striking, framed by silver hair and dark, unreadable eyes that seemed to absorb everything around them. "You're taller than I thought," she said quietly, her voice softer than he remembered yet laced with something heavier. Not warmth, something closer to caution. Eli forced a smile. "It's really you." She nodded, but her expression didn't soften. "We shouldn't stay in the open." That was the first moment Eli felt it, a shift in the air, subtle but unsettling. The woman who once spoke to him with laughter and poetry now seemed guarded, like someone who expected danger at any moment. They slipped into a waiting taxi. Mariam slid into the back seat first, positioning herself by the window, her gaze constantly shifting to passing cars and pedestrians. Eli tried to make small talk, but every question he asked was met with a short answer. She wasn't rude, just distant, as if her mind fought battles he couldn't see. The city blurred past them, neon signs, narrow streets, the distant hum of markets still awake at this late hour. Cairo felt alive, but in Mariam's presence, everything seemed muted, shadowed. "You look tired," she murmured suddenly. "It was a long flight." 17 hours, she said, almost under her breath, as though she'd been counting them one by one. When the taxi reached Giza, the driver turned into a quiet residential street lined with aging apartment buildings. Mariam stood near the end, tall but worn, its balconies draped in drying laundry. A single security camera blinked above the entrance, casting a red dot on the wall like a warning light. "Is it safe around here?" Eli asked. Mariam hesitated before answering. "Safe enough." Inside, the building swallowed them in darkness. The hallway lights were dim and flickered with every step they took. Their footsteps echoed up the narrow staircase, accompanied by the hum of an old elevator that didn't look operational. Halfway up, Eli felt eyes on him. A man stood at the far end of the corridor, a thin, middle-aged neighbor with deep-set eyes and a cigarette glowing between his fingers. He didn't blink, didn't greet them, just watched Eli with an unsettling intensity. When Eli met his gaze, the man tilted his head slightly, as if studying something curious. "Who is he?" Eli whispered. "No one," Mariam said quickly. "Ignore him." But the man didn't ignore Eli. As they passed, he whispered something in Arabic, low and sharp. Eli didn't understand the words, but the tone chilled him. Inside the apartment, Mariam finally exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath since the airport. The place was old but clean, filled with heavy wooden furniture and shelves overflowing with books. Curtains were drawn tightly over the windows, letting in almost no light. "You must be hungry," she said, though she didn't move toward the kitchen. Instead, she watched him again, studying, weighing, assessing. "I'm just glad to be here," Eli replied, trying to steady his voice. Her expression flickered, something like guilt or fear or both, but it vanished almost instantly. "Rest now," she said. "Tomorrow we talk." The way she said it made Eli's stomach twist. There was something she hadn't told him, something lurking beneath her careful words. And as he stepped deeper into her shadowed apartment, he felt the first true whisper of danger brushing the back of his neck. Something about Mariam, and this place, was not what he had been promised. And before the night ended, he would learn that someone else already knew he had arrived. Eli didn't sleep much on his first night in Mariam's apartment. The air felt too heavy, thick with heat and something else he couldn't name, something that made his heartbeat refuse to settle. Even with the ceiling fan spinning weakly above him, the room felt suffocating, as if the walls leaned closer each time he closed his eyes. He woke before dawn to the low, muffled sound of voices. At first he thought it was a television. But then he heard it again, sharper this time, the tone tense, almost desperate. A woman's voice. Mariam's voice. He pushed the thin blanket aside and sat up, listening. Her bedroom door was slightly ajar, a faint line of light cutting through the dark hallway. He stepped quietly toward it. "I told you not now," Mariam hissed. Her voice trembled. A second voice responded, male, low, angry, words in Arabic that Eli couldn't understand. The tone, however, was unmistakable accusation. Eli froze. "I said I'll deal with it," Mariam whispered fiercely. "Just give me time." A heavy silence followed, broken only when something slammed against a wall. Eli flinched, instinctively stepping back. He shouldn't be listening. But he couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. "Please," Mariam whispered, her voice thin. "Not tonight." Silence. Long, suffocating silence. Then footsteps approached the door. Eli rushed back to the sofa where he had been trying to sleep, lying down and pretending to be half awake. A moment later, the bedroom door creaked open. He heard someone walking down the hallway, then the soft thud of the front door closing. Only then did Mariam appear. Her shawl was wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her eyes wild and unfocused. When she saw Eli looking at her, she paused. "Did I wake you?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "I heard voices," he said carefully. "Is everything all right?" "There was no one," she said too quickly. "Just a phone call." "But Eli." Her tone sharpened instantly. "Drop it?" He nodded, though unease pulsed through him like a second heartbeat. She didn't look like someone who'd had a simple phone call. She looked like someone who'd been caught in the middle of something she couldn't control. Mariam stepped into the kitchen, her hands shaking as she poured water into a kettle. "You should rest more," she murmured. "Travel exhausts the mind." Eli didn't respond. His phone buzzed on the arm of the sofa. A message. He expected his mother, or maybe a bank alert. But the sender was an Egyptian number he didn't recognize. "Leave before sunrise." Eli sat up slowly, staring at the words. His skin prickled with cold despite the stifling heat. Another message came through immediately. "You aren't safe there." He looked toward the kitchen. Mariam's back was turned, but something about the tension in her shoulders made him hide the phone quickly. A third message appeared. "She's not alone." Eli's mouth went dry. The timing was too perfect, too connected to the argument he'd overheard. He didn't want to believe someone was warning him. Didn't want to believe Mariam was part of something dangerous. He had flown across the world for her. The idea that he had walked straight into a trap made his stomach twist violently. He finally stood and approached the kitchen, the glow of early sunrise bleeding through the curtains. "Mariam," he said gently, "if there's something going on, you can tell me." She stiffened. Then she turned toward him, her expression strangely blank. "The only thing going on," she whispered, "is that I finally have you here. And I won't let anything ruin that." Her words were meant to reassure, but something in her eyes, intense, almost desperate, made his chest tighten. He nodded slowly, though the warning messages burned in the back of his mind. And as Mariam walked away, her bedroom door swung slightly, revealing for a moment that it wasn't fully closed anymore. Unlocked. Eli stared at that thin opening, the echo of the earlier argument replaying in his head. Someone else had been inside that room. And whoever it was, they weren't finished with him yet. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that the apartment was watching him. All day, Mariam moved around as if nothing unusual had happened the previous night. No whispers behind the bedroom door, no argument with an unseen man, no frantic trembling in her voice. She brewed mint tea, asked about his trip, even smiled once or twice. But beneath each gesture, something felt wrong. Fragile. By evening, the air in the apartment had grown heavy with humidity. The electricity flickered several times, plunging the rooms into momentary darkness before the lights hummed back to life. Each flicker made Eli tense, half expecting someone to emerge from Mariam's bedroom again. When night finally fell, Mariam retreated into her room early. "I need to rest," she whispered. "Don't stay up too late." But Eli couldn't sleep. His nerves buzzed with anxiety, the warning messages replaying in his mind like a broken radio. "Leave before sunrise." "She's not alone." He stepped onto the small balcony outside the living room to get some air. The city glowed beneath him, streetlights, distant car horns, murmurs of life drifting upward like smoke. He leaned on the railing, trying to calm his thoughts. Then he felt it. A presence. He turned his head and froze. A man stood on the neighboring balcony, partly cloaked in shadows. The weak light from the corridor revealed only parts of him. Sharp cheekbones, unshaven jaw, narrowed eyes that studied Eli with unsettling intensity. He held a cigarette between two fingers, the ember glowing in the darkness. "You're Eli," the man said quietly, his English accented but clear. Eli stiffened. "Who are you?" The man exhaled a long stream of smoke. "Yusuf, Mariam's Simpson." Eli blinked. "She never mentioned." "She wouldn't." His tone cut sharply through the warm night air. "She hides everything that might scare you away." A chill crawled up Eli's spine. "Why are you here?" Yusuf stepped closer to the shared railing, though he didn't lean on it. "To warn you. And maybe to understand why you came." His eyes lingered on Eli, cold and analytical. "You think you know her, don't you?" "I know enough," Eli said defensively. "She's kind. She's been through a lot." Yusuf let out a humorless laugh. "Kind? Is that what she tells you? That she's fragile, lonely, misunderstood?" His voice sharpened. "You're not the first man she pulled into her world." The words hit Eli like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" Yusuf didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched Eli with a strange mixture of pity and bitterness. "She doesn't handle abandonment well," he said finally. "Men leave. Men disappoint. And she reacts." Eli felt his throat tighten. "If you're trying to scare me, I'm trying to save you." Yusuf's expression hardened. "You're the next one." Eli's breath stuttered. "Next one what?" But Yusuf stepped back, retreating into the shadows. "You shouldn't be here. Cairo is warm to strangers, but this home is not." He turned away. "Leave while you can." "What do you mean?" Eli's voice cracked with rising fear. But the man was already walking inside, sliding his balcony door shut with a soft, final click. Eli stood frozen, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The street noise below faded, replaced by the rhythmic thud of blood rushing through his veins. The next one. What did that mean? Was Yusuf lying? Exaggerating? Or was he the one who had sent those warning messages? Before he could decide, the balcony door behind him creaked open. Eli turned. Mariam stood in the doorway, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her face pale beneath the dim apartment light. "Who were you talking to?" she asked quietly. Eli hesitated. "Your stepson, Yusuf." A flicker of fear crossed her eyes, real fear, the kind that couldn't be hidden. Her hands trembled as she reached for the doorframe. "There is no Yusuf here," she whispered. "Not anymore." Eli stared at her, heart sinking. She was lying. And the night suddenly felt far more dangerous than the one before, especially now that he knew someone else was watching, waiting, and ready to intervene. The next chapter in his unraveling nightmare was already being written behind those shadowed walls. Eli barely slept after Mariam insisted that there is no Yusuf here. Her trembling hands, her hollow eyes, none of it matched the calm, poetic woman he had known online. And the fact that he had seen Yusuf with his own eyes made her denial feel more like a warning than an explanation. The apartment felt different now. He could almost sense the lies hanging in the air, drifting through the dim hallways like dust that refused to settle. Close to midnight, unable to bear the suffocating silence, Eli stepped out of the small guest room to get water. The hallway was faintly lit by a single lamp, its bulb flickering in a slow, steady rhythm. As he passed Mariam's closed bedroom door, he heard no sound, not even her breathing. She had grown too silent lately. Too controlled. Too fragile. Eli reached the end of the hallway when something caught his eye. A door he hadn't noticed before. Narrow. Half hidden behind a curtain that had been pulled slightly out of place. He approached it cautiously. The metal handle bore long scratch marks, deep, frantic ones, as if someone had clawed at the door or tried desperately to force it open. The wood around the frame had splintered in places. And then he smelled it. A faint but unmistakable odor seeped from the cracks. Dampness, rot, something sour. Something alive, or once alive. Eli's pulse quickened. He tried the handle out of instinct. But he tugged again harder. Still locked. The sound echoed through the hallway, louder than he meant it to be. He quickly let go and stepped back, his heart hammering. "What are you doing?" Mariam's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. Eli spun around. She stood at the end of the hallway, her shawl wrapped tightly around her as though shielding herself from something only she could feel. Her eyes were wide, her chest rising and falling too fast. I was just looking for the bathroom, Eli lied, wiping his sweaty palms on his jeans. Her gaze darted to the locked door, then back to him. You shouldn't touch that. Her voice was sharp, trembling at the edges. It's private. Private. That was not the word for a door that smelled like death. Mariam, Eli said carefully, what's in there? Her eyes filled instantly, not with sadness, but with panic. You don't trust me, she whispered. After everything, after you came here, you think I'd hide something from you? The accusation stung, and he saw how quickly she flipped from fear to heartbreak, like emotions were fighting for dominance inside her. I didn't say that, he murmured, stepping slowly closer. You think I'm dangerous, she snapped. You think I'm crazy, just like the others did. The others? Eli whispered. She froze. Her lips pressed together, trembling as though she'd revealed too much. I opened my home to you, she said, her voice cracking. To be loved again. To feel needed. And you stand outside my private room like some spy. It smelled strange, he said before he could stop himself. You just don't trust me, she repeated, voice rising. No one ever does. They leave. They always leave. And her voice broke. I can't survive that again. Eli held up his hands in a gesture of calm. I'm not leaving. I just want to understand. She stepped closer, gripping his arm with cold fingers. Then stop questioning everything. Please, just stop. Her desperation was real, raw, and unsettling, but it didn't soothe him. It only made him more aware of the locked door behind him, the scratches, the smell, the secrets tightening around him like a noose. Mariam suddenly released him and turned away, her shoulders shaking. Go to sleep, she whispered. We'll talk tomorrow. I promise. But Eli knew promises meant little here. As he walked back to the guest room, he heard a faint sound from behind the locked door. A soft, dragging noise. Something shifting inside. Eli froze, because he wasn't imagining it. Someone, or something, was in that room. And tonight it had moved. Eli didn't sleep again that night. His mind replayed the locked room, Mariam's trembling hands, and the faint dragging sound he had heard. Every corner of the apartment seemed to shift under his gaze, shadows stretching and bending in ways that made him second-guess what he saw. The air felt thicker, heavier, and somehow watching him. By the time Mariam emerged from her bedroom in the early hours, Eli had already packed a small bag, stuffing in a few essentials. He didn't plan to leave Cairo, not yet, not until he understood what he had walked into, but he needed space. A reprieve from Mariam's intensity, from the locked door, from the suffocating tension that pressed down on him like a weight he couldn't lift. Eli, where are you going? Mariam asked, her voice laced with irritation and fear. To walk, he said. Clear my head. You don't leave, she said sharply. Not at this hour. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm in her voice. He ignored her warning. His pulse had quickened, adrenaline chasing away the fatigue from days of travel and worry. He didn't look back as he stepped into the hallway. The dim lights flickered again, casting long, broken shadows across the cracked floor. Something about the hallway, empty yet brimming with tension, made him uneasy, but he pressed forward. At the end of the corridor, the locked room glared at him with its silent, unyielding presence. He shivered, resisting the urge to peer inside. His curiosity warred with instinct, the instinct that screamed at him to leave, to run, to vanish before the night consumed him entirely. Downstairs, the building was quiet, almost eerily so. A single window shone faintly in an apartment opposite his, and a shadow moved behind the curtains, someone watching. He didn't stop. He exited the main door into the narrow alleyway, the night air cool against his heated skin. Cairo was alive, yet distant here, the faint hum of traffic, the distant bark of a dog, the whispers of unseen neighbors. Somewhere behind him, a soft clatter echoed, his heartbeat syncing with the sound. Eli wandered for hours, lost in the city streets, hoping the night's chaos would ease the storm in his head. But when he returned to Mariam's building, he found it locked. The heavy front door closed, unyielding. He rang the bell, no answer. The shadows of the balconies above were still. The night seemed heavier somehow, heavier and darker than when he had left. By morning, Mariam was outside, feigning panic, calling for him. He stormed out. She told anyone who would listen, her voice controlled but strained. I don't know where he went. Neighbors whispered to each other. Late at night, they said, screams had pierced the building, the kind of screams that claw at your chest and refuse to fade. Others spoke of dragging sounds in the hallway, fleeting glimpses of a figure darting across balconies, then vanishing. Some swore they had heard someone shouting in broken English, calling a name, then silence. CCTV footage later confirmed the oddity. Eli had entered the building at exactly 1:13 a.m., captured on a grainy, flickering feed. But no footage showed him leaving. No movement in the hallways, no door opening, no shadow descending the stairs. It was as if he had evaporated into the night, leaving nothing behind. By the time authorities were alerted, Mariam had composed herself, pacing calmly and insisting he must have wandered off and gotten lost in the city. Her hands shook when she answered questions, her eyes betraying a truth her words denied. Eli Hartman had vanished, leaving only the faint echo of his footsteps, the lingering smell of dust and sweat in the hallway, and the locked door at the end of the corridor. As whispers grew and investigators began to probe, the building became a crucible of fear. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust rattling the shutters, seemed to echo Eli's absence. And behind the locked apartment door, the secrets he had almost glimpsed waited, dark, patient, and hungry. Somewhere in that building, someone, or something, knew he was gone. And the nightmare was only beginning. The desert outside Cairo seemed endless, a cold, empty canvas under the harsh glow of early morning sun. Dust swirled in low eddies, clinging to tires and boots as the authorities combed the roadside. What they found first was subtle, a shoe, worn and dusty. Then the body. Half of Eli Hartman's body lay crumpled on the cracked earth, twisted in a way that made the officers step back instinctively. The lower half had been severed with unnerving precision, the edges clean yet cruel. Blood seeped into the sand, dark and sticky under the rising sun. Nearby, tire tracks suggested a vehicle, a hurried departure, or perhaps an orchestrated scene designed to mislead. The brutality was shocking, yes, but there was a method to it. Someone had not acted in blind rage. There was calculation here, a coldness that made even seasoned investigators uneasy. Every cut, every mark, every displaced item spoke of someone who had planned this, and who had carried out their intent with terrifying resolve. Detective Karim Fahmy crouched beside the body, examining the scene. His eyes narrowed, scanning the environment, taking note of the minutiae, the broken branches, the smudges of sand, the faint footprints leading toward the nearby highway. He exhaled slowly, aware that he had seen many gruesome cases in his career, but few that combined sheer violence with such meticulous organization. "We need to find a witness," he muttered to his partner. Someone had to see something. And yet the desert held its silence. Only the wind moved freely, stirring the remnants of the scene, as if nature itself conspired to conceal the truth. Back in Giza, Mariam El-Sayed sat in the small living room of her apartment, untouched tea cooling in the cup at her side. When police arrived to question her, her demeanor was calm, eerily calm. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady, measured, almost rehearsed. She offered details about Eli's storming out, about his restlessness, and about her own supposed ignorance of his whereabouts. Detective Fahmy observed her carefully. Her serenity was unnatural. She did not flinch when he asked pointed questions. Her hands, resting in her lap, betrayed nothing, no trembling, no twitching. Yet her eyes, dark and deep, held a flicker of something the detective could not identify. Perhaps fear, perhaps calculation, perhaps both. "Where exactly were you last night?" Fahmy asked. "Did anyone see you?" "I was in my bedroom," Mariam replied evenly. "I went to bed early. You can ask the neighbors if you wish. I don't control what they see or say." Karim noted the contradictions. Her composure, instead of comforting, made him uneasy. Calmness in situations like this could be a shield, a weapon, or a mask hiding guilt. And the locked room, he had heard rumors about it, added another layer of suspicion. Her story did not align with the CCTV, the witness statements, or the circumstantial evidence pointing to the apartment as the last known location of Eli Hartman. But even with mounting suspicion, her air of normalcy unnerved everyone who spoke to her. Outside the apartment, neighbors whispered nervously. Some mentioned screams in the night. Others recalled dragging sounds, the rapid pacing of footsteps, fleeting glimpses of Eli entering the building hours before his disappearance. Each detail added weight to the theory that the apartment itself was the epicenter of the horror. As the investigation intensified, the police realized they were not just dealing with a murder, they were facing a carefully orchestrated act by someone who understood both human fear and procedural loopholes. Someone who had watched Eli, understood him, and ended his life with terrifying precision. And in the shadows of Mariam's apartment, that presence, the one that had orchestrated, hidden, and controlled, watched patiently, waiting as the authorities pieced together fragments of truth. By late afternoon, news of the discovery spread. Cairo felt smaller suddenly, the city whispering of horror in quiet corners, rumors growing faster than facts. Eli Hartman was gone, half of him lost to the desert, half of him left behind in memory and suspicion. The clock ticked relentlessly, but the questions remained. Who had done this? And perhaps most importantly, how much of Mariam's calm was truth, and how much was carefully constructed deception? The answers, Karim knew, would lie buried beneath layers of lies and darkness that no one had yet dared to uncover. Detective Karim Fahmy leaned back in his chair, studying Mariam across the narrow interrogation room. The apartment's ornate photos and bookshelves had been stripped from her home, replaced by the harsh fluorescent light of the police station. Her calmness, the same unnerving composure he had noticed at the scene, persisted, but he could now see the faint lines of tension etched around her eyes. She was still deliberate in her movements, measured in speech, yet something in her silence screamed of a long-hidden history. "Tell me about your husband," Karim began, placing a recorder on the table. Mariam's hands folded neatly in front of her. "He died years ago," she said quietly. "An accident." "An accident?" Fahmy pressed, noting her tone carefully. "No one has ever seen a body. The reports are vague. Witnesses claim they saw him leave the house the night he disappeared." Her lips tightened, a subtle twitch, almost imperceptible. He wasn't the man I married." Her voice wavered, then steadied again. "I loved him once. That's enough." Fahmy sensed the carefully layered half-truths. There was a gap between her words and her tone, an unspoken story lurking beneath. "And before him? After him?" he asked, leaning forward. "You have a pattern of online relationships with younger men. Can you explain that?" Mariam's eyes flicked away for a moment, then returned to his. "I reach out," she said. "I connect. I care for those who are lonely. Men like Eli." Her voice softened, almost pleading. "I offer companionship. They choose to accept it, or not. Some of them don't leave," Fahmy said, watching her reaction closely. "They disappear. Something happens. There's a pattern here, Mariam." Her jaw tightened, a faint quiver passing through her shoulders. "I can't control how people live or die," she said. "I don't cause it. They are lost to the world in their own ways." Karim made a note, observing the mixture of defensiveness and denial. Trauma cycles were evident, a history of emotional manipulation that may have begun with her abusive marriage and deepened over decades of isolation. Her calmness now felt like armor, psychological walls built after years of betrayal, abandonment, and loss. She tells stories, one of the junior officers whispered later, reviewing past online correspondence with Mariam. Poetry, emotional depth, loneliness, she draws them in, men much younger than her. And then, she isolates them. Fahmy reviewed the evidence with a sinking feeling. Each relationship bore echoes of the last. Charm, intimacy, connection, but also secrecy, control, and a slow tightening of emotional dependence. Do you understand why this looks suspicious? Fahmy asked gently. Your actions suggest a pattern. Emotional manipulation, obsession, even violence. Mariam tilted her head, calm again, but her eyes betrayed something else, fear. You're assuming things about me because I've lived longer than some. You're afraid of the shadows I carry. Shadows that left a man dead, Fahmy said softly. Her lips pressed together. The room grew heavy with unspoken words. Decades of history, the abusive marriage, a husband who may have died under mysterious circumstances, relationships formed online with vulnerable young men, were converging into a narrative that investigators could no longer ignore. She finally spoke, her voice low, almost sorrowful. I sought love where it could be found. I wasn't perfect, but I never sought to harm anyone. Not intentionally. Fahmy considered the statement. Intent was hard to measure, yet her patterns suggested both awareness and compulsion, a mind trained by trauma yet operating within obsessive boundaries. As the interrogation ended, Mariam was escorted back to her cell. She walked calmly, but her eyes darted to the window, watching the city lights flicker. Behind the veil of composure lay decades of unhealed wounds, carefully curated lies, and psychological dependency that had now collided with Eli Hartman's presence. The investigation team exchanged glances. They weren't just dealing with a woman capable of manipulation, they were facing a life shaped by trauma, obsession, and secrets that had waited silently for the right moment to surface. Outside, Cairo's streets continued without pause, but inside the walls of the station, one truth became clear: the key to understanding Eli's death, and the danger of what might come next, lay buried deep within Mariam El-Sayed's secret history. And someone else, closer than they realized, was about to reveal more than Mariam had ever intended. The police station had grown quiet as the day wore on, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the empty interrogation rooms. Detective Karim Fahmy was reviewing evidence from Mariam's apartment when the door opened. A man stepped in, tall, lean, his face partially hidden under a hoodie. Karim's pulse quickened. It was Youssef. You wanted to see me, he said, voice low, controlled. Fahmy gestured to a chair. Just sit down. We need to talk about Eli Hartman. Youssef sat carefully, hands clasped in his lap. For a moment, he said nothing, his eyes fixed on a single point across the table. Then finally he spoke. Mariam, she's not who she seems, he began. Not online. Not in person. She's unstable. Emotionally. Dangerous. Karim leaned forward. Explain. Youssef swallowed, his Adam's apple moving. Over the years, I've watched her spiral. Her husband's death. I don't know everything, but I know enough. She wasn't capable of processing it. She became controlling, manipulative. She pulls people in, men she thinks she can depend on, and isolates them. Makes them hers. Karim studied him carefully. And Eli? Youssef's jaw tightened. The night he disappeared, I heard them. A fight. Violent, screaming, yelling. I stayed hidden. I didn't intervene. He hesitated. I feared what she might do. I tried to protect him in the only way I could. Fahmy's eyes narrowed. And that was covering evidence. Making it look like he left. Making sure the building cameras didn't catch too much. Youssef's voice dropped. I didn't touch him. But I hid what I could after the fight. She was capable of more than anyone could imagine. Karim's mind raced. Youssef admitted to manipulation, concealment, and interference, but he stopped short of saying Mariam had killed Eli. Yet the implications were clear. The half-body discovered outside Cairo, the warning texts, the locked room, they all pointed toward a violent confrontation. Why now? Fahmy asked quietly. Why come forward? Youssef looked down, then back at him, eyes dark. Because the truth needs to surface before she destroys anyone else. I can't let that happen. She's all I have left of family, after my father died, after my mother, gone. I can't lose her completely, but I won't let her hurt anyone else. Not again. Karim noted the conflicted intensity in Youssef's tone. There was fear, yes, but also loyalty. a protective instinct twisted by years of trauma and dependency. Yusef's confession filled in pieces of the puzzle, the argument Eli had overheard, the dragging sounds, the locked room, and Mariam's obsessive possessiveness. But there was a missing element. Yusef's role was murky, and his intentions, though protective, were morally compromised. "Did you see what happened to Eli?" Fahmy asked. Yusef shook his head. "I didn't. I hid. I only know what I heard, the fight, the rage. And then, silence. Too long. When I finally checked, the damage had been done." Kareem scribbled notes, weighing every word. "And Mariam? She'll deny it all. She's practiced at denial, at controlling the narrative. You have to dig deep. Find evidence she can't hide. Or else," his voice trailed, heavy with warning. Yusef leaned back in his chair. The hoodie shadowed his face, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. "I did what I could to protect what's left of my family. But Eli, he wasn't supposed to die. That was never supposed to happen. She didn't plan him that way. Not fully. But she's dangerous and she's clever." Detective Fahmy exhaled slowly. Yusef had confirmed what he had suspected. Mariam's emotional instability was real, her behavior dangerous, and the consequences of her actions deadly. Yet even as Yusef revealed this truth, he kept a piece hidden, the exact extent of his involvement in concealing evidence. Outside, the Cairo streets hummed with life, indifferent to the confessions, the deaths, and the dark histories entangled in Mariam El Sayed's apartment. And inside the station, Fahmy knew the next steps would be crucial, because Yusef had exposed only the surface. Below it, deeper, darker secrets still waited, poised to emerge. The police station had grown quiet as the day wore on, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the empty interrogation rooms. Detective Kareem Fahmy was reviewing evidence from Mariam's apartment when the door opened. A man stepped in, tall, lean, his face partially hidden under a hoodie. Kareem's pulse quickened. It was Yusef. "You wanted to see me," he said, voice low, controlled. Fahmy gestured to a chair. "Just sit down. We need to talk about Eli Hartman." Yusef sat carefully, hands clasped in his lap. For a moment, he said nothing, his eyes fixed on a single point across the table. Then finally he spoke. "Mariam, she's not who she seems," he began. "Not online. Not in person. She's unstable. Emotionally. Dangerous." Kareem leaned forward. "Explain." Yusef swallowed, his Adam's apple moving. "Over the years, I've watched her spiral. Her husband's death. I don't know everything, but I know enough. She wasn't capable of processing it. She became controlling, manipulative. She pulls people in, men she thinks she can depend on, and isolates them. Makes them hers." Kareem studied him carefully. "And Eli?" Yusef's jaw tightened. "The night he disappeared, I heard them. A fight. Violent, screaming, yelling. I stayed hidden. I didn't intervene." He hesitated. "I feared what she might do. I tried to protect him in the only way I could." Fahmy's eyes narrowed. "And that was covering evidence, making it look like he left, making sure the building cameras didn't catch too much." Yusef's voice dropped. "I didn't touch him, but I hid what I could after the fight. She was capable of more than anyone could imagine." Kareem's mind raced. Yusef admitted to manipulation, concealment, and interference, but he stopped short of saying Mariam had killed Eli. Yet the implications were clear. The half-body discovered outside Cairo, the warning texts, the locked room, they all pointed toward a violent confrontation. "Why now?" Fahmy asked quietly. "Why come forward?" Yusef looked down, then back at him, eyes dark. "Because the truth needs to surface before she destroys anyone else. I can't let that happen. She's all I have left of family, after my father died, after my mother, gone. I can't lose her completely, but I won't let her hurt anyone else. Not again." Kareem noted the conflicted intensity in Yusef's tone. There was fear, yes, but also loyalty, a protective instinct twisted by years of trauma and dependency. Yusef's confession filled in pieces of the puzzle, the argument Eli had overheard, the dragging sounds, the locked room, and Mariam's obsessive possessiveness. But there was a missing element. Yusef's role was murky, and his intentions, though protective, were morally compromised. "Did you see what happened to Eli?" Fahmy asked. Yusef shook his head. "I didn't. I hid. I only know what I heard, the fight, the rage. And then, silence. Too long. When I finally checked, the damage had been done." Karim scribbled notes, weighing every word. "And Mariam? She'll deny it all. She's practiced at denial, at controlling the narrative. You have to dig deep. Find evidence she can't hide. Or else," his voice trailed, heavy with warning. Yusef leaned back in his chair. The hoodie shadowed his face, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. "I did what I could to protect what's left of my family. But Eli, he wasn't supposed to die. That was never supposed to happen. She didn't plan him that way. Not fully. But she's dangerous and she's clever." Detective Fahmy exhaled slowly. Yusef had confirmed what he had suspected. Mariam's emotional instability was real, her behavior dangerous, and the consequences of her actions deadly. Yet even as Yusef revealed this truth, he kept a piece hidden, the exact extent of his involvement in concealing evidence. Outside, the Cairo streets hummed with life, indifferent to the confessions, the deaths, and the dark histories entangled in Mariam El-Sayed's apartment. And inside the station, Fahmy knew the next steps would be crucial, because Yusef had exposed only the surface. Below it, deeper, darker secrets still waited, poised to emerge. The door groaned as the locksmith turned the key, the heavy metal lock finally yielding after decades of neglect. Detective Karim Fahmy stepped back, feeling the weight of what he was about to witness press against his chest. Years of whispers, missing men, and shadowed arguments had led to this moment, the sealed spare room in Mariam El-Sayed's apartment. As the door swung open, the first thing that hit them was the smell. Foul, metallic, lingering, a coppery scent that immediately set everyone on edge. The air was thick, stale, heavy with something that had been trapped too long. Every officer drew a sharp breath, careful to mask the nausea threatening to rise. Inside, the room was small and dimly lit. Dust hung in layers, disturbed only by the movement of their flashlights. The floorboards creaked under careful steps, and the walls were lined with shelves that bore the weight of forgotten objects. But it wasn't the age of the room that chilled Karim, it was the contents. On one side, old photographs were taped to the wall. Faces of young men, some smiling, some frozen in poses of awkward unease, stared out. Some were familiar from police files, missing reports, and online investigations. Others were unidentified. Each photo had small notes written beneath in careful, looping handwriting. "Won't stay. Love. Will leave." Near the center of the room, a small table held open notebooks, their pages filled with obsessive writings. Karim crouched, running a finger lightly over the words. Every entry detailed Mariam's thoughts on love, loss, and betrayal. Some were diaries of heartbreak, others were meticulous lists, noting the habits and weaknesses of men she considered vulnerable. The tone shifted constantly, from tender longing to sharp, almost predatory observation. A corner of the room contained something more visceral. Faint stains darkened in the wood, traces of blood dried into the grain. Not fresh, but enough to suggest prior violence, attempts at concealment, or accidents hidden from the world. The pattern was irregular. Scratches and drips hinted at panic, at struggle, at desperation. Karim's flashlight swept across the floor, pausing on a small set of restraints tucked beneath the bed. They were worn, frayed at the edges, yet carefully stored. His stomach tightened as he recognized the implications. The room was not just a repository of memories. It was a shrine to obsession, a carefully curated space where Mariam's psyche had been laid bare. Officer Ahmed, standing nearby, whispered, This explains the patterns. The missing men, the secrecy. It's all here." Karim nodded slowly, his eyes moving from photographs to notebooks to the faint bloodstains. Mariam's psychological breakdown was evident. She had constructed a world where love and betrayal were inseparable, where men leaving equaled betrayal, and where obsession became a dangerous form of devotion. Each young man in the photos represented another chapter in her attempts to control, manipulate, or hold on. He turned the pages of a particularly thick notebook. Names were crossed out, dates noted, details about online conversations, visits, and departures. The writings reflected fear, rage, and longing intertwined, a mind teetering on the edge, incapable of accepting rejection, incapable of seeing boundaries. "This room," Kareem muttered under his breath. "This is the key. The pattern. The intent." As the team continued cataloging evidence, the magnitude of what they had uncovered became clear. Mariam's world, hidden behind polite manners and carefully crafted calm, was a labyrinth of obsession, manipulation, and violence. Eli Hartman's fate was the latest, but not the first, casualty of this twisted reality. The room exuded a presence, a lingering echo of fear and desire, of love twisted into control. It was a private theater of psychological collapse, a space where Mariam had both worshipped and trapped her past, building a dangerous mythology of men who leave and betray. Kareem closed the notebook gently, his mind racing. The investigation had reached a critical point. Evidence was irrefutable, psychological patterns laid bare. And somewhere, just beyond the room's threshold, Mariam El-Sayed's carefully constructed reality was about to shatter completely, as the police finally held the truth in their hands.